Well, let me tell you something. If you thought you would have gotten a day off just because it was Sunday, then you were wrong, you little shits. Come back to class immediately because we are about to have an informative lesson today. Today, we're going over what is scaling and what does scaling mean. This is an important service to the community because I am somewhat tired of seeing way too many people simply defer to their favorite streamer or defer to the most upvoted comment and join the herd mentality of simply repeating what they heard without actually asking themselves why, without argumenting themselves. For example, this will come in handy for you when you want to choose a spec, when you want to choose what to play. Instead of going to YouTube and watching videos, mine preferably, you can just think for yourself for once. And scaling is a pretty important part of a spec toolkit because it can tell you how are they going to do deeper into the expansion. Obviously, there is always Blizzard to take care of because, as we know, balance patch after balance patch, they are known to be turning around certain specs now and again in their power through an expansion. For example, look at Destruction Warlock and BM Hunter and Fire Mage being relatively weak at the start of BFA, especially Fire Mage and Destruction were very weak at the start of BFA, and now they scaled out of control. They didn't scale out of control because they had good scaling in Uldir, they scaled out of control because Blizzard gave them band-aid scaling with essences and new traits and then corruptions. That's why they scaled. That's why they scale so well. But it is still helpful for you to realize why is your spec scaling well. What does it mean to be scaling well? Yes, you can still just ask Raider.io or Simulation Craft to simply tell you your best talents, tell you your best stat priority, and just don't ask yourself why. That is still a valuable course of action for you to take. If you don't care about this, go at the back of the class, pull up a book, and then just sleep. All of you, teachers' pets, come in the front and take some notes because we are going over scaling now. What scaling means, very simply, is how much do you get from a stat, from a secondary stat, more than what everyone else gets. 10% haste is 10% faster casting and faster GCD for everyone. You're not special for casting 10% faster with 10% haste. This is the same, right? 10% crit means if you crit, you have double damage, unless you are elemental, in which case you do 250% more instead of 200, but beyond them, everyone else gains the same from crit. There is nothing special. And your other stat is going to be mastery. Mastery is obviously a little bit harder to gauge because every spec is going to have a different mastery. The most masteries are going to be flat out damage increases on one part of your toolkit, in which case it's very simple to gauge how strong it is. Just look at how much of your damage is being touched and affected by your mastery. For example, Havoc Demon Hunter mastery increases chaos damage, which is 40% of Havoc's damage. Ret Paladin's mastery is holy damage, which is 60% of Ret's overall damage. Marksmanship has overall damage done, which is 70% of all their damage, all of their abilities. You have similar encompassing masteries like Fury, increasing all damage while they are enraged, Shadow Priest, increasing all their damage on their target with 3 DOTs on, and then you have the tricky masteries, like Enhancement, increasing the damage Frost, Fire, and Nature they do, which is about 60%, which is very good already, but also higher proc chance of Stormstrike and Wind Fury, or Frost Mage's Mastery, which is an entire mechanic, Icicles. This is where the synergy comes in, that I pointed out with your secondaries. How many passives do you have in your kit that are going to scale with your secondary effects? And how many abilities are going to benefit from it? You want some examples? You lazy shits? You want to be spoon-fed? Fine. Fire Mage. Hot Streak. Very simple, right? Not only do you do double damage when you crit, but for Fire Mage you also get an instacast Pyro. That's an example of good scaling with crit. On top of that, Fire Mage also gains 10% crit from all sources. Another good scaling for crit, beyond simply doing double damage. BM Hunter with Wild Call, critting auto attacks having a 20% chance to reset the cooldown of Barb Shot. This is another thing which is going to scale not just with crit, but also with haste, because more haste means more auto attacks means more chances for you to crit. So this is going to scale with 2 stats, Brain Freeze and Fingers of Frost for Frost Mage. They proc off of Frostbolt, which means they proc off of how many Frostbolts do you cast. So how fast do you cast your Frostbolt? Rogue, auto-attacking, again, your auto-attacks having a chance to generate 1 combo point and 8 energy. All these are examples of passives that are going to synergize with your kit, scaling more and more the more secondaries you have, and in some cases they can scale with multiple stats or multiple abilities. To give you a better example, we can go and look at the state of Windwalker Monk. Since it was my next spec I would have gone over in my review for the spec in Shadowlands, I was talking very positively about it. You know, I was a little bit too happy going, because I was like, at the end of the day, it's still going to be one of the least played specs. It's going to be one of the least wanted in raids, and decent enough in Mythic Plus, but nothing special. So why am I talking so nicely about it? I have to warn unaware viewers about the dangers of playing Windwalker. So the dangers of playing Windwalker, I'm not talking about the bugs, that's another thing, is that when you look at all these passives I showed you and you try and find them in Windwalker, you don't. The extent of the synergy in the Windwalker kit is that Tiger Palm, your combo point generator, your chi generator, has an 8% chance to make your next blackout kick free. And in return, your blackout kick is going to reduce the cooldown of Rising Sun Kick by 1 second. That is just about it. The Rising Sun Kick is going to have no synergy with anything. The Fist of Fury is going to have no synergy with anything. Most of your kit is going to be standalone and not be synergizing with anything. Your mastery doesn't do anything to you. It is, strictly speaking, very, very powerful because it increases all your abilities damage. The problem is those types of masteries are only good on specs that already have good scaling, already have good synergies with multiple systems. When your spec is in that state, all you want is just more damage. But when a spec doesn't have those systems, that mastery, for as good as it sounds, is still very poor. It leaves you with nothing to scale later in the game. You won't scale particularly well with haste, you won't scale particularly well with crit or with mastery. When you look at talents, you have things like Eye of the Tiger, which just puts a DOT on the target. The DOT have a chance to reset the cooldown of Fist of Fury? No. Things like Fist of the White Tiger, it's a 30-second ability, it better do something special. No, it just gives you 3 chi, it doesn't do anything. Does it reset the cooldown of Rising Sun Kick? Does it make Rising Sun Kick hit 2 times? No, nothing. Dance of Chiji, which is a good new introduced talent. The problem is, it is still just flat out more damage, it doesn't synergize with anything. The only mild synergy with Dance of Chiji is that the more chi you spend, the more chances you have to activate this. But that's about it. Even when you look at things like Conduits, it's the same as the Mastery. Conduits are very good for a spec that already has synergy up and running, because Calculated Strikes flat out increases the damage of your Spinning Crane Kick. Coordinated Offensive flat out increases your single target damage during your Storm and Fire, and Inner Fury flat out increases your damage of Fist of Fury. There is no synergy here, there is no scaling here, it's just flat out damage. Compare these with 2 of the conduits we have went over in the latest patch in the Shadowlands beta, which is the Red Paladin conduits. Virtuous Command and Templar's Vindication. Virtuous Command making your judgment buff you for 6 seconds to make your single target abilities and auto attacks deal 40% additional holy damage, which is scaling with your mastery, and Templar's Vindication making your single target finisher have a 30% chance to strike twice. Now these are good scaling conduits. These are conduits that are going to make you synergize more and scale more in the late game, not what Windwalker has. Even when you try to be bailed out by things like legendaries, again, let's try to be saved by borrowed powers. Even good things, good legendaries like Jade Ignition for your AoE burst, it is still just not going to be very powerful, because the damage increase is tied to Fist of Fury. Fist of Fury is tied to a cooldown. We have seen for like 2 expansions now that the cooldown reduction from Fist of Fury from your haste is very, very poor and not worth even stacking. So as a legendary, it's a good burst of damage and that's it. You will use it after every Fist of Fury that buffed your Spinning Crane Kick and that's it. Another very poor legendary like the Last Emperor's Capacitor. Again, it lightly scales with spending chi, which isn't very powerful because as a Windwalker monk, you are locked in the amount of spenders you have because Rising Sun Kick has a 10-second cooldown and Fist of Fury has a 24-second cooldown, so you are left with having to spam Blackout Kick and even Spinning Crane Kick of single target if you even wanted to build this up fast, and you can't spam them because you're locked by your mastery to use different abilities every time. So you see the absolute state of this shitty legendary. Windwalker is a good example of a spec that doesn't really have synergy to scale. It's why nobody is excited. It's why even when you will see my video about Windwalker, as I will be excited about the enjoyment of the spec and how nicely it can play and feel, there is still no hope because the synergy is completely lacking in terms of their scaling and the way their passive effects and their toolkit can scale later on in the expansion. Now, as a completely opposite look, we go over Frost Decay. We are going over Frost Decay because it's really jarring to look at the difference between Windwalker and Frost Decay. Right from the get-go, when you look at their passives, right, their mastery is the same in terms of boringness, it's just flat out damage increase from their frost damage. But then, after that, you start seeing more and more things that pop out that Windwalker doesn't really have. Runic Empowerment, makes their runic power as a chance to give them a rune. They have Killing Machine, which makes their auto-attack crits, having a chance to make their next Obliterate crit and deal frost damage. They have Rhyme, which makes their Obliterates have a 45% chance to make the next Howling Blast deal 150% more damage. And then they have a series of talents and even legendaries that can compound on all these synergies. Going for an example, I mentioned to you Killing Machine. Similar to Wild Call from BM Hunter, it's your auto-attack crits that can proc this, which means already you have an extra synergy with Critical Strike. You don't just do double damage like everyone else, you do double damage and you can proc Killing Machine. And just like Wild Call, you also scale with Haste, because Haste is going to increase your auto-attack speed, which means you will have more chances at critting, which means you will have more chances at proccing Killing Machine. Maybe you have missed the part where I mentioned that Killing Machine is going to turn the damage of Obliterate into Frost. This is a revelation for Frost DK, since they have gone 3 expansions, with a big crutch being that their strongest hitting ability, Obliterate, did not scale with their mastery because Obliterate is physical damage. Now Killing Machine is going to also make Obliterate scale with mastery. So right from the get-go, to humiliate Windwalker Monk, Frost DK has 3 different passives that all scale with secondary effects, beyond what their secondary stats would normally do. And the thing can get compounded on the talents. As I mentioned, the depressiveness of Windwalker talents, Frost DK can go for Icy Talons to make them auto-attack 15% faster. That's more scaling towards their Killing Machine. Because they attack so fast, they can go for Runic Attenuation talent, which gives them more runic power generation because of their faster auto-attacks. Because of their faster auto-attacks, they can also go for Frozen Pulse for more damage on their auto-attacks. The thing continues, because since you are generating so much runic power, and you're spending more runic power because of this, you have more chances to proc Runic Empowerment. That is going to give you more runes, which is going to allow you to cast more Obliterates. Casting more Obliterates gives you more runic power, which means you can spend even more of it. Casting more and more Obliterates is going to synergize with Rhyme, because Rhyme procs off of your Obliterate chance. And this can further be enhanced by your legendaries. For example, you can go for Koltira's Favor, which makes your Obliterate have even more damage, which scales well with this entire system, and have a 12% chance to refund 2 of the runes, which means just cast Obliterate again. Or Rage of the Frozen Champion, to make your Obliterate have a 50% higher chance to trigger Rhyme. You know, all of these systems together is what scaling means, is the amount of synergy you can get within your toolkit beyond just the basic boring effects of Haste, Crit and Mastery. Another example, since it's a pretty new one, is Havoc Demon Hunter. Havoc Demon Hunter has just gotten a new legendary, which is Chaos Theory. Chaos Theory allows them to, when Chaos Theory is procced by Blade Dance, it makes their Chaos Strike have a 100% chance to refund Fury. Refund Fury is good because it gives you the ability to recast Chaos Strike again, which is your main hitter for single target. You can go for a Conduit called Relentless Onslaught that is going to give you a chance to double strike with Chaos Strike, meaning double refund, especially within your legendary window, double guaranteed refund window, which also means you can talent into Cycle of Hatred. Cycle of Hatred makes the refunds when you use Chaos Strike reduce the cooldown of I-Beam by 3 seconds, which means you can get faster casts of I-Beam, which means you can get a faster uptime of Furious Gaze. Furious Gaze is going to give you more haste. The fact that you get more haste means you can talent into Demon Blades, auto-attack faster, generate Fury faster, have more Fury to spam Chaos Strike, get more refunds, cast more I-Beam, and the cycle continues all around your haste. These are good examples of scaling. These are good examples of things that are going to go deeper into an expansion and become progressively stronger because of your toolkit and the way it works by default. You don't need to have Blizzard come in and save you with borrowed powers. Although it's a little bit unfair since Demon Hunter did need Blizzard to come in and save them with borrowed powers. But to be fair, they didn't have this new legendary and the conduits and whatnot, so we will just give them a pass. But more or less, you can see where this is going, right? When we look at a spec and we see how much they can synergize with, it's very easy to see the potentials for scaling. I said I was gonna let Havoc Demon Hunter go off for now, but I won't let Vengeance go. An example is Vengeance Demon Hunter's mastery. Their mastery tied to their active mitigation is very poor. Their active mitigation is one of the weakest of all tanks. In fact, I would say the weakest of all tanks. 20-second recharge for just a 6-second duration of just armor mitigation, so physical damage mitigation. And the mastery in and of itself has very poor scaling. You need mastery to then refer to agility for your main scaling, which is going to increase just your armor on just your active mitigation ability, which has very, very poor uptime because it lasts too little for too long of a cooldown. This is, for example, a mastery that will scale very badly later in the expansion. It is the reason why Vengeance Demon Hunter has gotten outscaled very early in Legion, very early in BFA, and risks doing the same in Shadowlands. They will release in Shadowlands overstatted, essentially, ahead of the curve. Their strategy of healing through the damage taken, because they have initially very high damage, and their lifesteal and their heal back with Spirit Bomb and their orbs, their soul fragments, is gonna carry them. Eventually, because of this mastery being so poor, they will be starting to take so much damage that the healing is not gonna cut it anymore. Whereas it does and will for a Death Knight, because they still have their defensives. It won't for Demon Hunter anymore, because they have this type of mastery and this type of defensive ability, which gives them very bad scaling. Another example, to close, because right now we should have a pretty nice picture already, is something like Elemental Shaman. Elemental Shaman I mentioned having 250% crit damage instead of 200, but what they also have is a Lava Burst which is guaranteed to crit on a target with Flame Shock. And because it always crits, it is going to devalue your critical strike. You're not gaining a chance to crit on all your abilities. You're only gaining it on anything that isn't Lava Burst, which is a big part of your damage. The other nonsensical element is going to be your mastery, because your mastery is telling you cast more builders, cast more generators. The problem with the mastery is that when you do cast more generators, you end up casting more spenders, because generators are, giving you resource, and you have to spend the resource, so you end up casting more generators to cast more spenders, and the spenders don't benefit from mastery. Earthshock and Earthquake gain absolutely nothing from your mastery, which means later into the expansion you will be in a situation where your crit has been devalued because of your Lava Burst, your mastery is devalued because Earthshock and Earthquake gain nothing, and you will be pigeonholed. You will risk, of course, this is speculation, this is what happened in BFA and less likely to be fair to happen in Shadowlands, but you will risk being pigeonholed into haste, just like it happened in BFA. You ditch Lava Burst, you basically ditch anything else that isn't spamming Lightning Bolt, because it was your most decently scaling spell, with haste, with mastery, and with spell power. In general, these are the things you have to keep track on when you look at a spec and you look at their scaling and you hear talk about how well a spec scales, how badly it doesn't, and what is generally being referred to. Rather than being a parrot and repeating what you have heard, you can now analyze it yourself. You know, if I told you Sub-Rogue scales really, really well, you should be able to go into their toolkit, into their passives and their legendaries and their conduits and see for yourself why are they scaling well, rather than believing me at face value, which you should anyways, because I'm the man, but in general. For more shady individuals with more shady opinions, you should be able to form your own as a counter. And that was it, really. The lesson is over. We're going to resume our previously scheduled program. The next one is going to be the video about the Windwalker Monk when it comes to the spec overviews. So, I'll be taking my leave. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, please wake up the guys in the back. Thanks.